Hi, everyone. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer. Today, our legal live stream show features another special guest, and she's a practicing attorney who graduated from UNC Law School. Her name is Shelia Huggins, and she has her own practice now in Durham, North Carolina. So let's welcome Attorney Huggins to the screen.
Hi,
Hi, Sheila.
everyone.
Hi,
Hi,
thank you for
Judy.
being here. Yeah, I'm so glad to have met you through YouTube. And it was so funny after I started watching your videos, I realized, wait a second, she's in Durham, like one city away from me. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, thank you guys for being here and feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. So we normally start out just by asking the guests, what your family background is like and how you wound up going to law school.
Yeah, so it's interesting because so many people know me now as an attorney. They don't really know that I had a life before that. And so it's
Oh,
always like, oh wait, you used to do like environmental sciencey stuff. Even my daughter was just like, wait a second, what?
mhm.
Do I have to be sciencey too? But yeah, I went to NC State for undergrad and graduate school, and I worked in state government for a pretty long time. I guess around 9 years before I went to law school. So I do have an environmental background. That's primarily what I did. I worked in a lab for a while, and then I did some things on the regulatory side, again, for the state of North Carolina. But I went to law school. I now have she will be 21
Mhm.
this year.
Wow.
And my husband and my daughter and I live here in Durham, pretty much in the central area. So that's why you see me sometimes in Wake County, where you are.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I actually do more outside of Durham than I do in Durham. But
Mhm.
yeah.
I see. So, where did you grow up then?
Oh, so I grew up like an hour and a half east of here in Greenville, North Carolina, not Greenville, South Carolina, but in Greenville, North Carolina, home of the ECU Pirates, if
Mhm.
anybody's familiar with them. But it's also home of ECU's medical school and Vidant Medical Center. It's like the hub of medical care for Eastern North Carolina. So people on that side of the state, that is pretty much where they go when they need a higher level of medical treatment, or they've got some trauma or something like that.
Mhm. I see. So, were your parents involved in the medical field or working at
Well,
ECU?
it's interesting that you should say that. Neither one of my parents have a college degree. My mother was very adamant about education, and my father was sort of like, "Your mom says education's important," you know. But Pitt County was very much an agricultural type of county. A lot of North Carolina was. I mean, it's transitioned some to more a little bit more, I guess, manufacturing, but even that is on the downswing. But ECU is one of their primary employment centers. So my mom started out at Stokes Elementary as like a clerk,
Uh-huh.
and then she wound up on the campus of ECU, and then she wound up over at the medical school, and then in the oncology center. So she worked there for quite a number of years. So that's sort of her background. My father was a life insurance salesman, and I have sisters, and I have a brother who works for the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department.
Mhm.
He's down in
Oh.
Florida.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I had no idea you were a scientist before you went to law school then. How interesting. I mean, what
Yeah.
kind of work did you do as a
So
scientist?
yeah, I actually started out in a medical lab doing testing for syphilis and toxoplasmosis, and then I moved to an environmental lab, and I was doing testing for petroleum products for like petroleum contamination of water. So a lot of the county health departments across the state would send their lab specimens to the State Laboratory of Public Health. That's basically where I worked. And so I worked in that lab, which was the organic chemistry lab, during testing there. And then I moved, and I also did lead paint analysis. And I don't know if you remember, but for a while there was a lot of lead paint that was being used in mini blinds when mini blinds were
Oh,
back
yeah.
a really
Yeah.
big thing.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, testing for that just went up through the roof. And then also, that was about the time you also started to see a lot of importing from other countries for
Mhm.
children's toys.
Yeah.
And those countries did not necessarily have the same standards that we had when it came to, treatment and coloring of toys. And so a
Mhm.
lot of times those toys would actually have lead paint used on them, because lead paint keeps the color and it lasts a long time.
Mhm.
So, that was the thing, have lead in your paint. And so I did that analysis for a while. And then I moved to a radiation lab. So I was testing air and water samples for radiation. And then I moved over to hazardous waste, where I was talking to companies across the state about federal hazardous waste regulation. So I worked as an environmental chemist, advising businesses and industries across the state. Then I went to law school.
Oh, well, I mean, that job sounded very interesting and like you could do so many different roles, with your background. So why did you decide you wanted to apply for law school?
Because I did like environmental law. I still like environmental law, and I actually for a while worked for the city of Durham and wound up handling quite a few environmental issues, because when redevelopment's going on, there is usually some environmental contamination, especially when you're talking about downtown areas that were developed way back in the day when we didn't have the EPA around. People forget the EPA has only been around since like 1971 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So you had quite a bit of, let's see, disposal techniques that were used then
Yeah.
that, we still see some of the consequences of that now.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. You always hear about water being polluted here and there, even in North Carolina.
Yeah,
And
and I was going to say this other thing too. So the state lab, even now, is a central player in terms of COVID testing and that sort of thing. So yeah, the lab that I worked in was what do I want to call it? Virology and serology unit. So we did testing using blood serum samples to check for things.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, and so was there anyone in particular that motivated you to go to law school?
Not really, and it's really interesting because that last position that I started with the state, there was another guy who came on at the same time. We literally like started right at the same time, and we both left at exactly the same time
Oh,
to go to law school.
oh,
And he went to the University of South Carolina, and I went to the University of North Carolina. It was so funny.
mhm. Yeah, and, when you went to law school, were you thinking about becoming, say, like a patent lawyer or an
You know,
environmental lawyer?
it's interesting because I was around a few people who did have environmental backgrounds and or did have science backgrounds. I know, one person had like a PhD, another person had a lot of experience working in the science field, and both of them were like, "We're going to do patent law," and I was just like, and one in particular, he was like, "Sheila, if we do patent litigation, we get paid a lot of money because because anytime somebody's suing over, their patent being infringed, that would be us." And I was just sort of like, but I can't imagine actually doing patent applications. It just sounded, and here's the thing, it sounded absolutely tedious and boring to me. Yet I do genealogy research. So you would
Oh,
think that that would totally make sense for a person like me. It's sort of like, wait, but you do genealogy research, and
which
that
yeah, but
requires a lot of, you know,
tedious
yes.
research.
So who wants to scroll through census records and they just released, I think it was like 1950. So I've been like going
Mhm.
over that lately. But yeah,
Oh,
I wasn't really interested in patent law.
mhm. I see. But, so you must have been already, what, like, in your mid-30s when you
Yep,
were in law
yep,
school? So
yeah.
how did it feel being a sort of older
I
student
know,
at
right?
UNC?
It was interesting because there were times when some of the younger students would be like, "Hey, let's go to this and let's go to that." And I'd be like, "I have absolutely no interest in doing that," you know.
Yeah.
But the number of older students, I think there was enough of them so that when you walked into a classroom, you didn't feel like you were an alien or something. You didn't feel like you were from outer space. There really was a mix of people in the classes. So I didn't feel like I was the only one in a room full of kindergartners. It didn't feel like that at all.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, so you were
Mhm.
probably, like, at least 10 years older than most of your
Right,
well, a
exactly.
lot of the classmates, but hey, you look good for your age, right? So, it's not like you're, like, an obviously, like, older
Right,
person.
right. And there
Yeah.
were some who were obviously older. So I think that sort of plays with it too, because people look at me and think I'm younger.
Mhm,
So, yeah.
mhm. Well, so where did you live while you were in law school?
So yeah, I rented a couple of apartments, and then one time when I was taking some classes during the summer, rented a house, and then my husband and I, the last year, rented a house here in Durham, which is no longer here because they tore it down to build the highway.
Oh, sorry. Well, so you were already married? Did you already have your child when you
So
were in law
no,
school?
so that's the interesting thing for people who think that women's lives stop when they're getting education. It doesn't, because like I said, I was already older. So we had my
Mhm.
daughter. I had my daughter at the end of 2001, and
Oh,
people were just like, "So are you gonna like sit out a semester?" I was like, "Why would I sit out a semester? That's my last semester." So it's
uh-huh.
like, no. And it was actually a lot easier because I was really only taking classes 4 days of the week. I had one independent study, so my load was actually light because I had taken a course during the summer. So that really helped. And there were actually other women there who were pregnant too. So, like I said,
Oh,
it was a mix of people. Yeah, I think I think I know one of them actually did take some time off, but I was so close to the end. I mean, I had her October 26th, and it was a cesarean section. And so my husband drove me to and from class. I breastfed. I
wow.
mean, it was, and looking back at it, I was always like, that was actually the best time for me to do that because, working now and trying to do a whole lot, it seems like it would be harder now. But at the time, it just felt really easy.
Mhm. Yeah, because it was already your last year in law
Right.
school anyway,
Yeah.
which is
I
when
was
most
almost
people.
done.
Yeah, interesting. So, what does your husband do for a living?
So he actually works for the government. He oversees projects that receive federal funding for transportation.
Mhm. I see. Yeah, interesting. So, of course, you had to have a supportive partner too in order to make it through law school with a newborn baby.
Yeah,
So,
like I said, I mean, he like drove me to and from class when during that time where, because I was only out, like I only stayed out from class 2 weeks.
wow,
So, it's like
no
six
way.
weeks. It's like 6 weeks out.
That's incredible. And then what did you do about, breastfeeding? Or, I mean, did you find some private room where you could, like, use a
Pump and
pump or
stuff.
something?
Well, I didn't have that many classes, remember? So
Oh. Oh,
I wasn't even
okay.
on campus that long. Yeah, so it just wasn't even that big of a thing. But yeah, so I took 2 weeks off and then went back to class because all I was doing at home was sitting. And I was like, well, I can just go sit in class, but I couldn't drive because I'd had a cesarean. So he was working from home. So it really was him like taking me over there, him coming back and getting me for like 4 weeks. So
Oh.
yeah.
Did they have daycare on campus back then?
So they could have, I didn't know. I
Oh,
wouldn't know
you
because
didn't need it?
I was I really was one of those students who was really only on the law school part of the campus. Like that was it. Like I couldn't tell you anything else about Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
I really was. It was law school home. That's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Well, were you really excited when you got into UNC because that
Oh
meant you
yeah,
didn't have to move away?
I had applied to UNC and North Carolina Central because Central has both a day and an evening
Mhm.
program. And, their evening program is really tough to get into because it's only like one of, I guess, like almost one, maybe. Maybe there's some more now between like DC and Atlanta or something like that. But I had a graduate degree also, and I had done that part time, and I really didn't want to do another big degree like that. I felt like it's a big deal. My graduate degree was a big deal, but I did it part time. I was working the whole time I got it. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be fully immersed in the law school experience. So,
Mhm.
so I went with UNC.
Oh, okay. Excellent. And so what's your other graduate degree in?
So it's a master's of public administration, and then it's a specialization in environmental policy and management. So I'll backtrack. So the undergraduate was a biological sciences degree. It was a BS degree in biological sciences. And then I had a minor in genetics and I specialized in microbiology. So that's how I started out in that medical lab. So, and then going to the environmental lab. So it was easy when I went with the Master of Public Administration degree, to focus on environmental policy and management there.
Mhm. I see. Oh, so interesting. So you've already had you've worn so many different hats and everything.
Yeah.
And um, so about going to law school then, like what kind of legal jobs or internships did you do while you were in law school?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I'll tell you about the ones I thought about, and then I'll tell you about the one I
Sure.
took. So
Okay.
at the time, I still had an interest in environmental issues, but I also had an interest in just land in general. And one of the internships that I considered was with Preservation North Carolina. And for those who are listening, it's an agency that works to preserve houses and lands that are historic in nature. And so they provide informational resources and things like that. So I looked at them. I also looked at the Real Estate Commission, and their positions were primarily council positions related to licensing. So if it was a real estate broker that had some issues with their license and maybe they were now going to have their license taken away, that's what that position was going to be related to. And then, so I looked at both of those and was kind of like, eh. I wound up interning with Land Loss Prevention Project. So you can see a theme here, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
With Land Loss Prevention Project, which is a nonprofit legal firm that's a nonprofit law firm that's based here in Durham. And it was primarily in the beginning set up to help Black farmers and to protect the loss of land. Because a lot of times you see farmers, just farmers as a whole, the numbers are going down, and we now import a lot of our food. But you saw a real big reduction in terms of the number of Black farmers across the state. And there had been major litigation based on some discriminatory practices that the US Department of Agriculture had engaged in, and there was a consent agreement. And so a lot of a lot of the work that I did with them had to do with appealing people who had been denied relief under that consent agreement.
Mhm.
So that's what I wound up doing.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so this is how the circle comes back around though.
Mhm.
So when I first got out of law school, a I had my law office not far from my house. And then when I later moved, I got it downtown, and turns out it was in the building that was owned by Land Loss Prevention Project. They had moved downtown and bought a new building. And so
Oh,
I had my office in the very same building. So I knew the person who was the executive director. It was like,
oh,
hi, I'm
that's
back.
nice. How funny. Yeah. Well, did you think about joining them as an attorney after you graduated?
I didn't. I didn't. I don't think they had any positions open. I think I talked to them a little bit about consulting, and they didn't really have a need for that right then. But
Mhm.
yeah. I don't know
I
why I
see.
really didn't talk a whole lot to them about that. They might not have had anything open. I don't
Yeah,
know.
a lot of those nonprofits are very small. They don't have
Yeah,
many attorney positions. But,
yeah.
well, getting back to law school, though, how did you finance it?
Loans mostly. I did have some money saved up. And for all of those who are watching, I recently made my last payment. I think you you saw that too
Wow.
back in
How?
December. I paid that off. But you have to,
Uh-huh.
when you think back though, it was 3 degrees. And really, and I'm trying to remember how much I said I spent overall. I think it was like 50 something thousand, or maybe it was
Oh.
70 something thousand. I can't remember.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was not a whole lot of money when you
Mhm.
say, wait, she got an undergraduate, a graduate, and a law school degree, and she didn't hit 80,000.
Or
So
300,000?
no, so yeah, but when I went to state, tuition was like $500 a semester. So
Oh. Oh,
literally,
wow.
it was like 544 or something like that. Yeah,
Oh,
isn't that
okay.
crazy?
Yeah, that's right, and then you paid in-state tuition at UNC, so that's pretty
Exactly.
reasonable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's great. So you didn't feel pressured to try to find a big law firm job or, you know,
That's right.
try
It
to
makes a difference, it really does. And, my loans were primarily, and then I consolidated them after law school
Mhm,
through, the North Carolina College Foundation,
mhm.
and they had very reasonable rates, and you got a discount if it was automatically drafted. They had all these different discounts. So by the time I, paid it off, I mean, my interest rate was 1.5%. I
Oh,
mean, you
yeah,
you can't beat that. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So no wonder you weren't in a big rush to just pay it off
Right.
quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's better to
That's
pay
not
off
bad.
higher interest debt than
Oh,
yeah.
cool. Okay, well, we do have some questions here. So Tony wants to know about your fitness interests, and have you noticed any friends put on weight during COVID? How do we get
I
back
put
into
on
fitness?
weight during COVID.
Yeah, I did
Who
too.
didn't?
Yeah, it's
Um,
depressing.
yeah, so you guys, I just purchased an arena platform. It is in my living room. So I actually have now I am this person who is an all-around kind of fitness person. I love to be outside doing a run or a walk. I have a gym membership, and I've been actually the gym that I'm at now. Next year will make 20 years that because I joined in 2003. So I have the gym membership for when outside's not nice because I don't run when it's 20 degrees outside. I have it outside. I when we went looking for a house, I mean that was a big consideration. Can we? I mean, literally, it was. Can we put Emerson in a stroller and go for a walk? My husband likes to ride his bike. Can he get on his bike and go for a ride? And that really did drive where we decided to purchase a house. Um, then I have toys at home. So I don't just have a gym membership and
Yeah.
like to go outside, but I have a treadmill. It has slowly been dying. And as long as it is still breathing its last breath, I'm going to keep it until it falls apart. But I have a treadmill. I also had a water rower, which I purchased during COVID because there was that portion of time when gyms were shut down, even though
Yeah.
mine was sort of semi open.
Mhm.
But yeah, I love the water rower. I looked, the thing about the water rower is, especially for people who are looking for something meditative when it comes to how they want to engage in fitness and activities, the water rower, the sound of it and the rowing can be, a big stress reliever. It can be a great way for people who don't want to like jump into exercise in the morning to say, you know what, I'm just gonna put on some of my aromatherapy, maybe some candles, maybe some light music. And as the sun is coming up, it's just gonna be me and the water rower and that sound of swish,
Yeah.
swish. And it is very, I mean, it really like helps center me sometimes. And I just bought this arena platform.
What
So
is
the
that?
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
What is
Sheila,
that?
what is that? So, I think I was going to get the tonal, I think it's called, that goes up on the wall. It's like the mirror thing,
Mhm.
but it hooks up on your wall and it stays there. And I kept watching LeBron James and I was like, yes, LeBron and I are going to work out together. I love this. Look at LeBron. Yes, I'm loving this, LeBron. We're going to do this together. And then I kept getting, how you go on Facebook or you go wherever and
Mhm.
Tonal's now following you everywhere you go. So then I started getting followed by this arena platform. And it was like this black box and
Mhm.
people they had there was this cable that came out of it and it had a bar and it had like this other handle and a rope and I was like, wait, LeBron, we might not make it, dude. So yeah, I had to leave LeBron. And last week my arena platform came and I've been trying it out. So it actually has an app on your phone. It comes with a stand. You put your cell phone on it and you can literally just put increase weight and it automatically increases the weight. It keeps up with your time. It keeps up with your reps. I love this thing. My
Oh.
daughter has been on it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
definitely remember that video you made when you first got your water rower, and I thought
Yeah.
that looked pretty innovative, but I didn't realize that it also produces like the calming sound of the water
So
too. Yeah.
yeah, so technically I'm an introvert. And so, you've probably also heard me talk about going to the gym in the morning, that's a real struggle for, I mean, even, you've heard me say now, I will have been there 20 years, yet
Mhm.
it is still a struggle for me to walk in there. It's bright lights, it's a lot of people, it's a lot of banging, it's loud music, it's a lot. And, sometimes I'm just like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll wake up and be like, I just cannot do it today. So
Yeah.
yeah, the water rower, especially also at the end of the day, if there's just been a lot that's been going on.
I see. So, is there some YouTube channel where people can learn more about this arena platform that you're talking about?
So my YouTube channel is Sheila Huggins now. And so that's where, it's some vlogging, it's some working out. I can't remember the one I did today. So Patrick comes in this morning and he's just like, Sheila, a lot of people feel intimidated coming into the gym. Can you do a video on that, please? So I came back home and talked about how not to be intimidated, how to lower the intimidation factor. Like go on a day when it's not as crowded. Have the trainer or owner walk you through the gym so that you get a chance to see where everything is and get introduced to the machines and that sort of thing. So I talked about that. So yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you guys out there, be sure to check out Sheila's YouTube channel, which also covers a lot of fitness things as well as life as a lawyer type things. Um, so I guess that one of the themes for today's show was also how to keep your sanity as a lawyer. So can you tell us a little bit about any
Yeah.
difficulties you've encountered
Oh,
as
goodness.
a lawyer and how you dealt with it?
Sorry, my eyes
Oh,
itching.
okay.
So yeah, and just for people watching, Judy did ask me, she was like, Sheila, is there anything that's off limits? I'm like, no, there's nothing that's off limits. And I'm gonna start by being very open and transparent about it. Look, I think most people don't take the time to engage in self-care as much as they should. I think attorneys are put in positions a lot of times where they are dealing with other people's struggles. And as an attorney, we have access to I can't remember what it's called now, the legal assistance program, lawyers assistance program.
Yeah.
And so I do participate off and on with that. And it's a group that gets together and sort of, makes sure that we're okay. And there are people who have all kinds of issues that come to the table. Mine tends to be more around just workload, stress, and anxiety issues because I always have too much on my plate.
Mhm.
And so it's usually around that. And if there's anything, that you feel like you just want to talk out with people, it's confidential, like what is said among the members of the group stays with the members of the group. And so yeah, I have found that to be a very helpful way to be with other attorneys who kind of know what you're going through. I think that's what's really helpful about it. And so there is this sort of sharing, but you can also get feedback from people and ask people, okay, I'm in this really awful thing. Tell me what you think I should do. And I did run into something last year that just was, I don't want to say it was traumatic, but it was very stressful. I mean, highly stressful. And I was just like, I cannot take this. I'm done. I mean, I literally went through phases where I was just crying because it was so stressful. And yeah, so it's really good. And the other reason I also mentioned that is because I was actually attending an event last week, and they talked about that as being, I guess, secondary or indirect trauma when you are constantly exposed to people who have been through trauma, and you hear it and you have to help them with it. To some extent, there is sort of this secondary trauma that you take on too, and so depending upon what type of practice you have, you may not even recognize that that is impacting you and your psyche and your mental health, and not even know and understand that you might need to take some time to engage in some self-care and some therapy for yourself. So that's one of those things that so right. And I say this a little bit in some of my YouTube videos too, that for me, it is not just about physical health. It has to be about mental health also. So I see them as, you can't have one without the other. So you're never going to be well as a whole person if you only focus on one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had no idea the Bar Association actually had these kind of like sort of like a support group. I thought it was more
Yeah.
like them, maybe one person reaching out to someone who might be suspected of having a drug problem and then trying to get them to see a therapist or whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's good to know. I mean, but I think some of the stress that I felt in the legal profession had to do with other attorneys. Like when you deal with opposing counsel that is very obnoxious and rude, then it just really ruins your day and makes you hate being a lawyer. So I've definitely had that happen. And I don't know what the solution is other than that, all these bar associations, CLEs, they try to give lip service like, oh, we have to talk about professionalism within the legal community. But there's plenty of rogue attorneys that don't care about their professional
Yeah,
reputation or how they treat other people, and it's
right.
just very frustrating when you have to deal with them.
Yeah, I can say that, I have experienced a lot of attorneys and quite a few judges over the last couple of years. There've only been a couple of judges that I really was just sort of like, did you really just say that? Kind of thing. You go, oh, I can't believe you just said that, but okay. But on the attorney side, there maybe have only been one or two attorneys, and one was just a little more difficult, not necessarily someone who was trying to be obnoxious or mean. The person was just, is, how do I say this? The person is very straightforward, you know? And I have heard that person have conversations with other people. And if you take it personally, um, then it can be easy to get bothered by that person. I tend to look at that person as this person is just really sort of trying to ask questions, to frame things in the best light and to get to the best resolution. And so I try not to take things, actually, I don't take anything personally the person says, but I do know a lot. I've been with other attorneys who have said, I will not work with that person. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, I guess I have a different tolerance level. But the other thing too is, yeah, you're right. Some of these attorneys are obnoxious. Some of the judges are obnoxious. One of the things, that I tell myself though is usually some of what we see is coming from a place of their own pain, and they have not taken the time to take care of it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I try to reconcile it. It's like, this is just a person's behavior, that's their personality. I should feel sorry for them because maybe they have some mental illness, who knows?
Yeah,
So, or
yeah,
something
yeah.
else
It's
going on in their family causing
right,
them to act like that.
right.
Yeah, there was this guy that was so obnoxious to deal with in a civil litigation case I had about 15 years ago. And he was just like so obnoxious and rude and cocky and everything. But then years later, I found out he had died of cancer, and
Mm.
apparently he had written an essay for the bar or something, talking about his struggle with anxiety and depression. And, it definitely sounded like he was suffering during that time. I'm like, but he still didn't have
Right,
to
but he
act
took
like
it
such
out
a
on
jerk.
you. That's
Yeah,
the
it's like,
thing.
you don't have to
That's
be, like,
that's
such a
like
pain in the
right,
ass,
right.
like, taking it out on all sorts of other people and ruining our
Mhm.
days. But, yeah, but I was like, "Okay, well, I mean, yeah, I guess it was just eating away at him to the point where he
Yeah.
got cancer." So, yeah, so we have to deal with that. But you didn't actually tell us, though, like, what areas of law have you been
Oh, yeah, yeah,
practicing?
yeah.
You had your own
So
practice?
mostly business. So,
Mhm.
so yeah. So mostly business law, and when I first started out, I also had my real estate license too. And let me tell you, after a while, I was just like, I can't do both of these. And it wasn't even like the practicing real estate; it was the jumping through the hoops for the real estate commission. It's like, okay, so did you get your CEs for the real estate license? Did you get your CLEs for the law license? Did you turn in your privilege license stuff for the real estate? For that firm, did you turn in your privilege license for your law firm? And it just got to be a whole lot. And as much as I love real estate, I was like, I do not have to have a license to love it. I can love it from afar. So in the past, I have done real estate law because, like I said, I love real estate, and I sold real estate. And but now I don't really do any of that. I do mostly things around business law, and so I've tried to focus a lot more on things that have to do with content creation, entertainment, social media, intellectual property, all of those sorts of things. So I actually taught um, over at Central their business and entertainment law
Mhm.
class. I did both a summer session and that was online. That was a virtual session. I mean, and then I also did one that was in person. I love the in-person classes. In-person teaching is great. So I've done all of that. But yeah, so right now I'm sort of trying to transition away from one-on-one representation and moving more toward doing more things digitally. So Um, so I've actually set up an Etsy shop where I'm going back and taking a look at some of the contracts and forms that I already
Mhm.
have and just sort of tweaking them. And the competition on Etsy is very high. So it's not like you're going to be selling a form for $150,
Mhm.
not if you ever want to sell one. Or you better have a whole lot going on with it. So right now, I think I have on that particular shop, I have like 31 um, products. And so it's a variety. There are different kinds of templates and forms, agreements, and ebooks and guides and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And what I've also done is taken some of that, and I now have some courses on Skillshare, and so they go hand in hand. So a course that's on Skillshare, the
Mhm.
transcript that went along with it, I would then take and use that transcript to create the ebook version that I sell on Etsy. And
Oh,
so, yeah, and so then for people who buy the ebook, I may say, okay, you can also get a 30-day free trial to Skillshare, and you can go ahead and check out the video course relating to that ebook that you just purchased. So that's how I'm moving away from, the way we used to practice law to,
mhm.
just being able to provide a lot more just content in general, because that's what I find that I really like. Because, like
Mhm.
I said, I'm an introvert. So there's only so
Oh,
much one-on-one interaction that I want to have.
yeah.
So it's,
But
mhm.
you're a real entrepreneur also because I had no idea you could sell that kind of stuff on Etsy. I thought that was like handmade
So
trinkets and
right.
earrings and jewelry.
And you're right, it did used to be more that way. I mean, because when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, well, if I try to do this, they're gonna, like ban me and block me and kick me out because it's not a sweater that I knitted or something.
Yeah.
But over the years, they sort of transitioned, and you have to be cognizant of the different rules that these different platforms have.
Mhm.
Yeah, so in addition to like my YouTube channel, and I do have another channel that I started that is supposed
Mhm.
to kind of be legal focused, but I haven't really kicked it off very well. So
Okay.
there's supposed to be that. Then there's Skillshare. Then there's the Etsy shop, and so I'm
Mhm.
adding, a, some of these other things to move
Yeah,
more
that's
toward
awesome.
that.
So what's the name of your Etsy shop? Is it your name?
So so no, it was actually and I don't want to call it a trade name of my law firm because then I need to go actually get it approved by the
Yeah.
bar. So
Uh-huh.
trying to keep it separate,
Mhm.
and it be more about forms and templates and not
Mhm.
about the practice of law. So I'm trying to, make sure I'm not crossing that line there. So it's
Mhm.
Ms. Legalista. So like that's sort of the name that's my YouTube
Oh,
name, and it's I actually have the website
okay.
name for that, and that's the Etsy shop. And
Oh,
I just started an Instagram for that too.
oh, cool.
So,
Did I spell it right? Legal.
yes, yep,
Okay. Okay, interesting. Wow, it seems like you've really been like spending a lot of time developing other things other than just a straightforward practice of law.
yeah. I'm up. I'm like some nights I'm like, okay, what did I get? Like 5 hours of sleep last night. I'm tired. But
Yeah.
it is very much, here's how much of the legal work I'm going to get done today. And then at some point in time, I'm going to switch gears. And sometimes I'm working on the legal work and I can, if it's something that I'm working on where I might be able to do that because I'm waiting to hear back from somebody and work on a contract at the same time, then I'll do that. So for instance, I got most of the legal work done today that I needed to get done. And then I switched over to working on a podcast sponsorship agreement.
Wow.
So for instance, if somebody has a podcast and they're saying, "Oh, I want to be able to get sponsors for individual episodes," then that's what this agreement is. So my goal was to get the draft of it finished by the time we
Mhm.
started tonight, and I did. And the thing about it is, I'm usually starting with another contract that I have, and then going through it to see all the other things that I need to add and the things I need to take out. And every once in a while, I'll go online to see what different versions there are out there. And it was so funny because the one that I was looking at today, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is your version sucks." I was like, "My version has way more detail in it," because I've worked with people for so long, and because I produce content myself. Do you know what I mean? I know what
Mhm.
needs to be in it. And I know a lot of times there's not enough detail, and people come back and say, "Oh, well, that wasn't even in the contract."
Mhm.
So yeah, it helps when you have experience and lived experience with that when you're putting it together. So
Mhm.
yes, I am moving from that traditional sort of one-on-one representation to more consulting. And I mean, people will be like, Sheila, do you have this kind of contract? I'm like, go to the Etsy shop.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Well, Serena has a kind of a different question. She wants to get back to the topic of you being married when you were in law school and then having a child. So, what advice do you have for a woman in her early 30s who fears that law school will delay finding a spouse?
Gotcha. Um, so it's interesting. So I have my daughter who's 21. I have two nieces and two nephews and all of that, and I have been telling them to wait um, and focus on finding themselves and being able to support and take care of themselves before they feel like they need to have this other relationship. The tricky part is that works for men, because the sperm are always going to be there, even though they say as they get older, that can be an issue too. But with women, you really do have a ticking clock if you want to have children. And now you're trying to fit in law school and, being a mom and being a wife and taking on some other responsibilities. I will say that, and this is just my personal opinion, other women may feel totally different about this, but and I'm going to speak here from where I live. So, where I live, when I pull up the data, and look at poverty statistics from about the time that women start menstruating, and you compare the poverty of men and women till about the time they're starting to die off, in every like 10-year cohort, after you get from like the 12 to the 21, and you start to go, okay, 21 to 30 and 31 to 40 and 41 to 50 and 51 to 60, women lead in poverty in each one of those cohorts. And so, as we think about, going to law school and taking that time to do that and how we fit in marriage and having children, there has to be this conversation of, well, what does self sufficiency look like in addition to having a supportive relationship and being able to find a supporting relationship? Because I'm just telling you, the numbers speak for themselves. Even as we get more education, we still tend to lag in income. And I would say this to any woman who's out there, um, it, you know, the other partner who's on board and who's participating, you just never know. I mean, the partner could get hit by a bus the next day. And so, as you're thinking about how you want to do it, um, be very mindful of putting together a plan in place and trying to figure out how it's going to work. You're always going to have challenges. It's sort of like I tell people with the contract. The contract is just to help us cover as many issues as we can, and we know we're never going to cover them all. There are always going to be these things that pop up, and so it's more than a balancing act, because I think we still live in a very traditional male-dominated society, and that's reflected by still the practices we have around childcare and labor laws and all of that. So I'm just saying, the not balancing and the limited support you see, all that stuff's a real thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I would definitely say if you wanna go to law school because you're still in my eyes, you're still young if you're in your early
Yeah.
30s.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's when I went. I just didn't see my age as an issue. And the interesting thing is they called it, there was a name that they called it when you were like an older student. They called it, oh, you were a non-traditional
Oh, yeah.
student.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Mhm.
So yes, because I was in my 30s, I was a
Yeah.
non-traditional student.
Yeah.
And but you know what? It's not a bad thing to recognize that, because what that means is that you can now say, okay, so it's sort of like the whole car safety thing. Remember when it was like, oh, when they were doing safety tests, they'd always base it on the man and the man's weight and the man's height and the man's makeup.
Mhm.
And at some point in time, they were like, well, wait a second, men aren't the only people who drive cars. Women drive them too. And so we need to go back and make sure that the safety features that we're talking about work for women too. And so it's the same sort of thing. If you don't recognize that you have non-traditional students there, then you won't ever recognize that you've set up your whole system to only work for 20 something year olds and not people who don't fit that mold. So it's interesting that they have a name for it, but as long as there's a recognition that there need to be systems in place for all of us, let's put it that way, then I think that's a really good thing. But yeah, I still go for it. I'm like, have your plan and go for it.
Mhm. Yeah, because you can't count on even getting married anyway. So I kind of feel like that's kind of something that you shouldn't really worry so much about, like thinking, well, if I go to law school, then, how am I going to find someone to marry and have kids with?
So,
Well, maybe
well,
you'll meet somebody in law school.
that's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say. There were plenty of people who met other people in law school. And then the other thing is, I knew one of my friends, she was in law school, her husband was in medical school. And he got so interested in what she was studying in law school that he decided that I think I want to go to law school too. But
Oh,
yeah, so
sweet.
there's still older people on campus in a lot of these different programs. So you still have graduate students who are there, and then some of the other professional programs also. UNC is a pretty large school, so the opportunity is still there.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, well, I mean, I think your first year in law school, you should really buckle down and study hard because it's all about what grades you get your first year of law school. But, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with dating by 3L year or towards the end of your second year in law school. I mean, I did mention in an old video about what I wish I had done differently about law school. And I
Ah,
do feel like I got so distracted with dating and dating drama and all the random new people I was meeting when I was in DC. So that definitely had a detrimental effect on my law school grades because I wasn't studying as much. So definitely I would say first year you shouldn't be that sociable or even think about getting in a new romantic relationship, but then later on I think it's fine, you know.
well, it's interesting that you mentioned the what I wish I had done differently. So I was I had bar prep in my head from like day one in terms of what courses I was taking because I was just like, I'm going to take the bar one time and that's it. We're not doing this two and three times. This is
Yeah.
a one-time event. It's not like birthdays. We're not going to be celebrating taking the bar every year.
Yeah.
There's a cost associated with that. Every time you have to pay those application fees and you have to study, and so there's the cost, the lost cost because or what is it called when you're not making money because you're doing this other stuff? There's that cost.
Oh, the
Yeah.
what is it? Lost
Yes.
something
Something.
cost.
Look it
Lost
up.
opportunity cost. Yeah.
Opportunity cost. That's
Yeah.
right. Opportunity cost. So
Mhm.
yes, that's a big thing. And so for me, it was like even after I had Emerson, I was like, I'm still taking this test one time and I'm going to be done. And so what happened as a result is I was making sure I was taking courses that were going to be on the bar. So it's like, wait, secured sales and secured transactions. Oh, let's take that. Okay, we got a really bad score in that in the class, but that was because I was out because I had Emerson. But yeah, I was very much focused on that, and then I supplemented, that with some other courses I was interested in. So, I'm very much involved in politics. So I took election law. I took anti-discrimination. I took First Amendment because, that's just what I'm interested in. I wish I had taken or had more time to take more. I wish I had, the time to take more courses. I wish I had taken an entertainment law course, back then, which is funny because now I'm like teaching. Now I've taught entertainment law, which I
Interesting.
absolutely love teaching. I love teaching that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I wish I had expanded and been able to go beyond just making sure I was checking the box on these bar exam courses.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. So Jay has a different question. Congrats on remaining so youthful. Yeah. See, I thought you were like 40 years old or in your early 40s or something. How did your fellow 30 something law students fare in the job hunt? Did any of them succeed in the big firm world? Any tips for older students regarding the hiring process?
Yeah, so the one who left at the same time, who left the state government job the same time I did, I think he wound up working with a bigger law firm in South Carolina, not like a, top 10 or anything like that. I think he did well. There was another person I know who was a little older. He wound up getting a job with a major North Carolina retailer. Um, yeah, the one that had the PhD, I think she went back to working for a biomedical firm or something like that. The guy went into patent litigation with a decent firm, I think out west maybe or something like that. So, all of them were a little bit older because that's the other thing. You wound up sticking around, you wound up being around people who are older as a result. Several of the older students actually opened their own law firms. So that much I will say that for them, I think that they felt more comfortable with that sort of independence because they had already been out in the world some. And so for them, there wasn't this sort of, oh no, how am I going to do this by myself? And then the other thing about it is they had spouses. So if you got a spouse that has a job and, there's some stability there, and maybe they don't have kids, because I'm thinking back, I think some of them may or may not have had kids. So yeah, that's sort of what they did. I tended to see the younger law students go through with the regular hiring on campus interviews and process. I think I did one, wait, I did two. I did interview with one pretty large firm in Raleigh, and I don't think it was a good fit. It was not going to be a good fit
Oh,
because the the kind of work their clients would be the clients that I would be opposing, not wanting to work for. Let's
oh,
put it
okay.
that way. Yeah,
Yeah, the polluters, the big corporations
that's
that wanna
exactly
take
what.
over
Yep.
the little farms
Ex-
or whatever. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what that was.
Uh-huh.
And then there was another firm that I interviewed with, and it was kind of the same thing. The first one was sort of this downtown Raleigh firm, so they were really stuffy. I was just like, oh my gosh. And then toward the end, when I graduated, there was another firm that I interviewed with. And at that point, I was more like, I just don't see how this is going to work having a young child. And the firm was in Raleigh and we were living in Durham. And I was just like, this seems like it's just going to be a stressful mess. So,
Mhm,
yeah. But it did appear to me to be that most of the younger students were going through the formal hiring process
mhm. Yeah, that's
on
what I've
campus
seen.
interviews.
Mhm. Yeah, 'cause I'm thinking of, there's one attorney friend of mine who also went to actually, a couple of them. Yeah, I do know of several people who had careers going before they went to UNC Law School. One of them
Mhm.
ended up working for a smaller law firm and then has his own successful law firm now. And then another guy, he just started his own law practice. But like you said, this person had a spouse who was working and could provide the health insurance. So he was able to take that risk and go out on a limb and try to start his own solo practice, and he's still in practice. He works out of his own home. And then the other person ended up working for the NC Appellate Defenders
Oh,
Service,
okay.
doing criminal
Mhm.
appeals. But in her situation, I mean, money wasn't really an issue. She never really wanted to do big law, and she has a spouse that makes good money, so she wasn't pressured to try to find a higher paying job. Yeah, because those appellate defender type jobs, they normally don't pay that great, but she
Right.
found it very rewarding. Yeah. So here's another question. Are there red flags that come up with clients themselves? Can a client ever drive you crazy? Yes, if you do family law or custody, especially. What about you?
Red flags. Okay, so let me talk about red flags because I have these conversations with clients and I have them just in general also. And the problem is, I don't follow the advice that I give my clients about red flags. And so There is data out there. You guys are going to be like, oh my God, you can so tell she has a science background. There is data out there that talks about gut instinct and intuition and red flags and that spidey sense that you get. And what it says is that previous experiences that you've had that like sort of left you with, a negative vibe, or some sort of intuition, that's hardwired into your brain. And so when you're put in that setting again, your brain recognizes it before you do. And sometimes you don't even do it. And so they say that that messaging is already there. And that's why you have this sort of feeling, I don't know if I like this person. Something about that person just doesn't sit right with me. It's because your brain is recognizing that you've been through this before and is sending your body signals that's like, no, Sheila, don't do this. Sheila, don't do this. And so I tell my clients that very same thing. You don't know how many clients have come to me and said, you know what, Sheila, I knew when we were signing the contract that this was not going to go. And I'm just like, why didn't you listen to yourself? I actually had a client one time. We had gotten the contract drafted. I mean, and it had like this licensing part and this merchandising. It was this whole long thing. And he was going to lease part of his space to this other party. And he was like, Sheila, now he's over here doing this and he's gotten the keys and he's done this. Now, granted, the contract had not even been signed yet. And my client was just complaining about this other person all the time. I looked at him and I had drafted the contract. I looked at him and said, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. You're having issues now. And I said, you're not going to be calling me in a week asking me how to get out of this contract. We're not doing it. I said, if he asks you why you aren't doing it, just tell him my lawyer said I can't do it. Just blame me, have him call me. I said, but I'm not doing this. I said, you're not going to get mad at me in 2 weeks and say, Sheila, why did you let me do this? And so it's that same sort of thing when you're an attorney. So here are some of the things that I watch out for. Clients who have unrealistic expectations. Like they think you're going to be their savior and fix everything that's wrong with their life. They think the time frame is going to be tomorrow. They call you at weird hours. They send you emails and don't really understand the process. They think that because they've read up, they now know the law. Okay. So they have
Yeah.
totally unrealistic expectations. And with this person, part of it is you always want to set the expectations yourself. You give them a time frame. You tell them what kind of hiccups and challenges you're going to run into. But with this kind of person, all that stuff goes right in one ear and out the other. It's like you've never even said it. So like that's the person you totally want to run away from. That's like the biggest one. Then there's the one, like I said before, you just get the sense, and sometimes you can't put your finger on it. That one I wouldn't take. Oh, and I think that's my computer kind of
Oh, yeah. There's some
battery
little
came up
clacking
today.
noise.
Yeah, that's what that was. And it gets so loud, the fan starts running. So let me know if that's an issue. The other thing is, oh no, I sort of forgot what else I was going to say.
Well, you
So,
said that, like, the client is already giving you some sort of, like, bad
right,
feeling,
yeah,
and
so
I've had
that
that
one,
happen too when I
mhm,
could tell, like, this person just seems like they're never gonna be satisfied. They're
right.
just, like, very, very hostile with their attitude and
Mhm.
very angry at the other person. I'm talking about family law cases mostly, but have you ever
Yeah.
done family law?
So you know, not really. Sometimes people will call me for a little bit of advice, and
Mhm.
I'll tell them, I'm like, that's not my area of expertise. Yes, I know what you're talking about. So there have been some instances where I've done the paperwork for a divorce where I've just sort of drafted it because it's fairly simple. A lot of it's online for North Carolina.
Yeah.
It's very straightforward. The children were all at majority age. They had already sold the house, like, and this was somebody I knew,
Mhm.
and I was like, so tell me, just tell me these things. I was like, okay, so it's no assets. So it was really simple. And I was just sort of like, I will get you all of the paperwork. You take care of all the process. But I did send her an email just sort of saying, okay, service this, here are all the things you got to do. But basically, I just did the paperwork and slid it over to her. So yeah, so I don't really do a whole lot of family law. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's,
but you've still definitely had your share of some clients that are difficult or people that you just
yeah.
really didn't wanna
Yeah, but
represent
yeah.
after a while.
Yeah, usually, like I said, it's they have unrealistic expectations regardless of what you say. They just I just don't feel like a good like I just don't have a good feeling about them. And so there was a client the other day, I was asking her something because, you have to ask questions to get background information and understand what's going on. And she kept answering and she kept answering and she kept answering. She was giving me this information. I kept asking more questions. So finally she comes back and she said, okay, so I was lying and it really did. It was just sort of like, no.
Jeez. Well, I hope at least you charged her for the consultation for
And the
wasting
thing
your
about it
time.
was, I was thinking to myself, well, I knew you weren't being truthful, but so it's just, yeah, like I can't help you if you're not going to tell me the truth. I don't know what else to do with you then.
Yeah, because I feel like as attorneys, especially since we're solos with our own practices, we run into so many different people with different personalities every day that I kind of feel like after talking to somebody for say like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I can tell, is this person going to be a pain in the butt type of client that I don't want to represent, or does this person seem sort of rational and sane and might be a decent
Right,
client?
right.
Yeah. And also, I do have some other videos on my channel, talking about the red flags about potential
Mhm,
clients and
mhm.
how to deal with difficult people. And I would say definitely if the person already had another attorney, or worse yet, if all they do is complain about their previous attorney or attorneys, or they owed their attorney money and didn't pay their old
Mhm.
attorney, then it's like, no way, you're going to do the
Right.
same thing to me.
Yep, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly right.
Yeah, like, very difficult people who have been, like, shopping around trying to find an attorney, and they've already talked to, like, 5 other attorneys, or they're trash talking attorneys that you actually know and have a good opinion
Yes.
of, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I kind of have, and I'll tell people now, if it's something that's easy that I can help them out with, but yeah, I'll just go sometimes now, you know what, I'm really not taking any new clients right now. Or, this is really not something that's, that I typically handle and I wouldn't
Mhm.
want to mess anything up for you. And sometimes it's just bad timing. Sometimes I'm just like, you know what, I'm underwater right now as it is. I would not be able to get to you in, for like 6 months. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna help you.
exactly. Well, also another red flag that I ran into a few years ago was someone that just kept wanting to talk down the initial retainer because it was for civil litigation. And the person was just very nitpicky about how much money he would have to pay and stuff. And finally, we came to a figure. But then later on, he ran over the retainer deposit because he was so needy before
Um,
mediation. So he ran over the retainer and never paid me the rest of the money that I was entitled to because I spent all this extra time dealing with him and
mhm.
his witnesses and all that. But it's like I should have known better, because he was difficult
Right.
from the
That's
start,
right.
being a cheapo. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like following our own rules.
Yeah, you kind of learn as you go, and then the more you get burned, then you're like, okay, never mind. I'm not going to try to be nice and try to be that affordable attorney that gives discounts and feels sorry for people and does free stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that is
yeah.
definitely that's probably one of the biggest balancing acts, I think, because you want to get clients in the door, and sometimes there are just some people that you want to help, but all of that helping takes time, and you need that time to actually do the work and earn money, and so there's only so much of that you can do.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up soon. I know it's over an hour now. Serena asked, the other panel members who attended Notre Dame shared that the students were countrywide. What about the student body at UNC Law? Where do people end up geographically after graduation, and how portable is that degree?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you've been following now some of the recommendations about, right now you're licensed at the state level, and anybody who's engaging in the practice of law outside the state, could be accused of practicing without a license. And
Mhm.
so, part of the conversation now is taking a look at that and whether or not there's a need to change that. I've always said that I thought that that was ridiculous. But there's actually some talk now. I think the ABA has been looking at that more and saying, it might be time now for us to look at changing that. And so that would definitely make the license more portable. Um, you know, right now there is a way sort of to get licensed in other states, but you still have to jump through a lot of hoops. You still have to fill out and go through their application process, even if it is reciprocal. There's still fees. They still want to make sure you're doing CLE. They want to make sure you're up on their laws. And so it's not real simple. It's still a lot of work if you want to do it. The thing about it, though, is, it depends on whether or not you want to practice law or whether or not you just want to use that education in a way that provides you with some compensation. And so that's sort of the key there, looking at alternative ways to work and have a career that may not necessarily be the practice of law. So it depends on what you want to do. So I think in the end, eventually, I don't know when that's coming, but I think it is going to be more portable than it is now, and that we are going to get to the point where you're going to be able to practice in other states without having to say, oh, okay, well, now I got to go take another bar exam, or now I got to, 'cause that's a lot. That really is. And then let's see, what about the student body countrywide? So UNC is still very much a North Carolina public university. And because of that, there are requirements to some extent that, and this is for the UNC system as a whole, there are requirements that the universities primarily serve North Carolina residents. So the universities have to keep that in mind when they're looking at the student body. However, they do try to make sure, and they like to share this sometimes too, that, our class is made up of people from 48 states and 13 countries or something like that. So once they get beyond that sort of threshold where they can say, yes, we are still primarily serving North Carolina residents, they then really go in hard on trying to have a diverse body.
Yeah, my little sister went to UNC Law School, and she did have some friends that were from New York and Virginia. And then a couple of her friends ended up getting big law firm jobs. So one of them got a big law firm job out in Dallas. And I'm not sure how she did that, though, because she wasn't even from Texas, but I think her
Oh,
husband got a job in Texas. And since she was on the Maine Law Review, she was at the top of the class. So she was able to get that big law job in Dallas, even though she had no geographical ties to there. And then another friend worked for a big or bigger law firm around Chicago after going to UNC Law School. And I think same thing there, where her husband's job took them to Chicago. And then unfortunately they end up getting divorced, but like I think she's still doing well working for a big firm after going to UNC. So it's possible, but I would say the vast majority of UNC Law School students do stay around the North Carolina
yeah,
area.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So many of them are from North Carolina that,
Mhm.
yeah.
And then also from what I've seen and heard from my sister too, there's a sizable number of students there whose parents are attorneys around North Carolina. So they basically already have a job lined up when they graduate, or if they can't find a job somewhere else, then they go back and work for their parents. Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of a few right off the top of my head.
Yeah. Oh, so Amy Sue, thank you for being here. How soon did you start getting clients after starting your own firm?
So, one of the things I did do was to sign up with the North Carolina Bar Association's lawyer referral service.
Mhm.
It's very different now. So, the rise of social media allows you to really do a good job of marketing your own firm and getting your name out there. You just have so many more opportunities now. So sure, it was that, and websites were really just starting, and it was sort of like you didn't do your own, you hired somebody and they got you a website, and it kind of looked just like every other attorney's website. Everybody had the same sort of look, and you had it from the same people. You ran ads in the phone book, and so that's why, even though you're asking it, times have just changed. There's no phone book that's being delivered, and so you're paying for Google ads now. And so it's a little different. You're still paying for advertising. Some people are. I haven't paid for advertising in years,
Mhm,
but but yeah, it sort of depends on what you're doing. It's just very different now.
mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I immediately got clients. Yeah.
yeah, you just have to be able to market yourself well and kind of get to be known in a certain niche so that people will hopefully refer you and get active in different bar associations, different attorney groups, and, you know, make up your own new group of friends that meets up for lunch, networking and everything. But when I left my previous firm, I did take a small handful of clients who wanted to stay with me. So I did have a tiny, tiny stream of income thanks to those clients that I brought over. But I mean, it did take some time. I felt like I was barely making any money for the first year, but then
Yeah.
gradually through word of mouth and networking and getting more referrals from other attorneys, I also did do that lawyer referral service for a while too.
Mhm.
And it actually resulted in a really great client where I've had my first jury trial because
Okay.
this lady and her husband couldn't find any other attorneys to represent them in this really weird real estate type of lawsuit and defamation lawsuit. So I was like, well, that made it all worth it because I did get a lot of really crappy clients or, just people that were kind of weird that had no legal case calling me through lawyers referrals. So there were plenty of times I
Mhm.
thought, is this worth it? You get so many phone calls and emails from weird people and they have no
Yeah,
legal claim, but you just never know. If you throw yourself out there, you might eventually get some good clients out of it.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, hi, April. LSAT or law schools are now accepting a GRE. Okay, yeah, I've definitely heard that, but I'm pretty sure LSAT is still the standard for the vast majority of
Yeah,
places.
and I've heard that they're looking at getting rid of the LSAT too. I think, COVID just changed a lot of things. It's very interesting, and I think it's resulting in people just taking a look at, and it's not just the legal industry, it's industries across the board. Me and this battery. It's different industries across the board, and people are having to say, we're in a totally different environment here in terms of the technology that's available to do jobs, and we're just going to have to ask ourselves if the legal industry is still going to be way, because it's such a traditional, I mean, the profession as a whole. There are plenty of counties that I can do virtual hearings for, and then there are some that just, like, you wonder if they'll be able to do virtual hearings in the next 20 years.
Oh
So,
gosh. Wow.
yeah, and so again, it's that sort of inequity that you see. That's all. I mean, it goes down to the clients too, if you think about it, because if your legal system in your county isn't even up to the part, or what kind of services do you think they have in terms of being able to find lawyers who are experienced in a lot of different areas? Probably not. They're
Mhm.
probably general practitioners, and you know, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just what's kind of tough about the situation is that there are people who need legal services, but the lawyers aren't going to go to those little towns because they can't really make a decent income. And who wants to really live in some like rural area where, you know, you're not going to have any people that are like your level of academic success or professional attainment and then live out there, and who are you going to socialize with or hang out with?
Right. I
And if
mean,
you have a
yeah,
spouse, does your spouse wanna live out there? No. No.
yeah, your peer group, I mean, your peer group is not just, it doesn't just help you in terms of, professional success, but it's like your mental support system for the work that you do, you know? So you want to make sure you're in an area where there's going to be a peer group there for you.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're sort of out there on your own, and then that's when you see these other things happen, because there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of work. Maybe I don't know what to do. I don't have anybody to call. So yeah, it can become very difficult. But yeah, like I said, it just varies in terms of the services. So the industry as a whole, I think, has a lot of changes that it needs to consider making.
Yeah. Okay. And just this one comment: why do they make bar exam results? But yeah, I'm not really sure. But I know that they put it in the state bar journal, the names of all the people who are planning to take the bar exam, and that way the attorneys can look down the list. And if you know of somebody that's on the list that lied or cheated or has some sort of dishonesty in their background, then you can contact the state bar, because that's what some people at one of my old firms did. Like, they saw that there was some guy that they had terminated from a job
Mhm.
and contacted the state bar about the person's ethics. So yeah, but I'm not sure why the bar exam results are public. Maybe it's just tradition, you
Yeah,
know.
I've sat in on the review process, the interviews. So I've done that a few times where you interview the bar students who are getting ready to take the exam and trying to get their license. And, it's that's an interesting process to be a part of too, because you get that whole file of everything. And some of those files are like this, and some of them are like, this or something.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's very worrisome to see, because remember we talked earlier about the amount of student loan debt, and it can be concerning to see someone who's younger, and I've seen people with the hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and it's sort of like, how are you going to pay that back, and
Mhm.
what kind of lifestyle are you going to have? What does this
Mhm.
look like? Because you want to
Yeah.
make sure, and you're not asking from a judgmental standpoint. You want to make sure that there's a plan, that they're not going to struggle with that, and then as a result have some additional consequences because of that. So it's sort of, you're trying to be preemptory, and be proactive about saying, what's your plan here?
Mhm. Yeah. So, in other words, that's something that people have to divulge when they're making their bar application is, how much debt you have, in addition to, obviously, if you have any criminal record or you've been arrested or you've been suspended or, put on academic probation, accused of academic dishonesty in the past, if you've been fired from any jobs, they want to know all this stuff. Although, I'm not really sure, like, how much of it really could keep someone from getting their license, but of course, it depends on the severity of what happened. Like, if you got convicted of something that had to do with stealing money, for example, right?
Yeah, I remember there was a guy who graduated when I graduated, and this is not about his interview, so I'm not divulging anything confidential here.
Mhm.
But some of the classmates were saying that he did struggle with getting his approved because he had had a number of speeding tickets.
Oh.
And so, and so, and so in that case, I think it was the frequency, and I think it was how the proximity in time. So it would be different if he had gotten them when he first got his license versus you're in law school, dude, and you're still getting speeding tickets.
Mhm.
So I think that was sort of the issue. It was the
Yeah,
number and the fact that they were so close to him,
yeah.
while he was in law school.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Well, I think we've answered all the questions. Thank you so much for staying overtime and everything. And I really appreciate everybody watching as usual. And so I think our next guest is probably going to be one of the subscribers who showed up on one of my live streams a couple of weeks ago. He's a housing attorney for a nonprofit legal organization in New York City. His name is Shantanu Basu. And so he's going to talk about life as a public interest lawyer in New York City. So I think he's coming on next Friday, but I'll have to check my calendar. So, Sheila, if you can hang on for another minute or
Yeah,
so, and
yeah.
we'll say goodbye to everybody out there. Hope you all have a good weekend, and thank you, Sheila. Take care.